who might have lived around 180 years, 1800 years BC, almost 200 years before Buddha, because Buddha refers to the teachings of yoga, and many of the early Buddhists were even they have written commentaries on Yoga Sutras. Now, something about the order. His name is Patanjali, you know. Now, Patanjali was a very unique person. His purpose was to write something that will help us to live a happy life we'll say, in a way that our mind will be our best friend. How to turn our mind into our best friend, our best guide. So if you can have a mind that's your best friend, there's nothing more required. So in the process, he actually wrote 3 important works. He wrote these Yoga Sutras to remove the toxic material from our mind. So that's the literal translation of a Sanskrit verse. That is, Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Vaidikena Yopakarotam Pravaram Muninam Padanchalim Pranchalim Ahanatosmi. This is the literal, the verse that's frequently chanted in many of the yoga traditions, you know. So I am going down, I pay tribute to this great sage Patanjali, who wrote Yoga Sutra to help us to cleanse the dirt and filth of our mind. And he wrote a commentary on one of the Ayurvedic textbooks called Charaka Samhita. That commentary is lost, it is not traced. And according to some scholars, Charaka Samhita itself is his original work. That's a different matter, not very important right now. And then he also wrote what is apparently the most voluminous work on philology and linguistics. It is called Patanjala Mahabhashya. That is the most extensive commentary on the science of grammar, the science of language. And is being extensively studied by Western Indologists all the way from the mid-18th century onwards. Mostly it was taken up by the German Indologists to begin with, and then now it has become, of course, an important study in universities where language is a very important topic discussed, which is certainly not the case right now in the United States. Now, because language, the study of language itself has something much more to do. Language is not just a medium of communication. The language that we speak has an impact on our mind, and our mind determines what language you speak. To give an example, if you record all the tabooed words from Oxford Dictionary and play it to yourself in the early morning, all the undesirable words, you will go crazy. On the other hand, if you play some good hymns, devotional music and play in the morning, your mind will become calm and quiet. So language is something very important, and he wrote this extensive. I mean, the real work is almost double the size of Webster's dictionary, double the size, and it is in metrical form. Now, and then he wrote something more. He wrote the Yoga Sutra. So that's the literal meaning of this verse which I discussed. And the Yoga Sutra itself, as the tradition going back to 3 great sages. It is called Munitraya. Muni means a sage, a philosopher, a saintly person. Munitraya means a tradition created by the heritage, by the teachings of 3 great saints. That is Tuve Patanjalim Vyasam Shankaram Cha Munitrayam Kartru Sutrasya Bhashyasya Kramar Vivaranasya. There is a verse which means I am paying my tribute to these 3 great sages. One is Patanjali, who wrote the sutras, 195 sutras. Vyasa, who wrote a commentary. Vyasa is not the great Vyasa of the author of Puranas. Vyasa was the one who came in the line of the traditional succession of teacher-student relation, succession, called parampara. All these things will be taught by oral teaching. No book was used. So Vyasa comes in the line of the great successive teachers of yoga tradition. And he wrote a commentary, and if you had not written a commentary, you won't be able to understand what Patanjali actually meant. See, Atha Yoga Anushasana literally means now we are beginning yoga. What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. But Vyasa writes a long commentary on the state of our emotions and feelings and attitudes, how our actions impact our character, our mind, how our mind becomes polluted by taking in, by imbibing, as I mentioned, as a toxic material, and how to clean our mind, to cleanse the mind, so that mind will be kept stable, serene, and peaceful and tranquil. So all these sutras would have remained unknown and almost unintelligible if Vyasa had not written a commentary. The third great philosopher who comes in the line is Shankaracharya, who wrote a commentary called Vivarana, which actually follows the tradition of Vyasa. This is just an introduction. Now today I am going to take up the next topic, which is a natural, it's a very important one, but it's a natural an integral part of any discussion in yoga. It is called Ashtanga Yoga, which is the central thesis of the entire yoga book. It contains 8 disciplines: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. These are 8 disciplines which constitute what is called a path, which begins with some spiritual disciplines, controlling our senses, our mind, our thoughts, and also creating and developing certain values like non-violence, contentment, happiness, self-restraint, self-control, and as I mentioned yesterday, a kind of spiritual common sense. So we will discuss that today. Now, one important purpose of this Ashtanga Yoga is to release our mind from a trap. What's a trap? I mentioned this conflict between what we want to do and what our mind is willing to allow to do. That's a big problem. There are very few people in the world who don't want to do great things, good things, who don't want to be good human beings. Every drug addict wants to get out of this terrible, terrible trap. Every alcoholic wants to get out of this. Every internet addicted person also wants desperately to want to come out of it. But mind will not permit you. I gave this example yesterday. You want to meditate, and when you meditate, mind becomes restless. People think that by meditating, they can get peace of mind. It is true, but that's an advanced process. What normally goes by the name of meditation today is only a kind of relaxation. It is certainly good and has its purpose and its value. But meditation, the word dhyana used, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Dhyana is the 7th step in Ashtanga Yoga. So next one is only samadhi. So meditation is a higher process. And its precedent, its earlier step is dharana. So what happens is, when we try to meditate, when we try to calm our mind, when we take our mind away from external things and turn inward, mind revolts. Mind gets irritated. Mind won't permit you to think of higher things because you are not trained the mind to think of higher things. So what happens is, Yoga Sutra takes the first step to help us to get out of this trap of mind, a trap of our own tendencies. It is our own self-imprisonment. Now, one is yama. Yama is the first discipline. Now, yama literally it means what you call kind of self-restraint, self-control, the ability to say no when our mind goes against something that is actually good for us, and shows a tendency to do something that is really harmful. Now, one after another, I shall discuss this. So, one is yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, self-restraint, the first step. Then certain practices. This discipline called yama is a universal value, and certain observances are secondary. For example, ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. It's called yamas. Shaucha, santosha, tapas, swadhyaya, isa, pranidhana is called niyamas. Niyamas are more observances, practices that help us to follow certain disciplines. But the first step is yama, self-restraint. Now, one important teaching of Patanjali, which is not frequently emphasized in traditional yoga schools, is one should take up asana only after being fully established in yama and niyama. So, yama, niyama, asana. Asana is the third one. The reason is very, very scientific. Any scientist or physiologist or psychologist will agree with that. Suppose we have an unrestrained mind and we become very strong, healthy and vigorous. What happens? It creates restlessness. It's almost like giving a nuclear weapon to a pariah state. It's something like that in modern language. So, yoga gives us power. What kind of power? The power to concentrate our mind on something, on anything. Whatever we learn and whatever tool in our hand we use, its potency depends upon the ability to concentrate our full attention, full mind on what we do, what we speak. Pinpoint, called ekagrata it is called, means the edge is very sharp, not multipolar, but sharp. So, yoga practices, any kind of yoga practice, even asana, pranayama, pratyahara, these three, gives us tremendous potency of the mind, to the mind. Our ability to concentrate becomes intense. But before that, we should have already restrained our mind. We should train our mind, we should educate our mind to make use of whatever power we are going to get for a good purpose. Otherwise, it creates problems, either external problems or internal problem like restlessness. This is important, but that's why if you drink a strong coffee, too much of it, and meditate, you feel more restless. But if you stay alive, maybe it won't happen. Because before you try to focus your mind on one point, you are already invigorated, you are already made our mind and nervous system hyperactive. You have generated heat and energy. Yogasana produces heat and energy. So this heat and energy is the fuel that can be used for a good purpose and also for a bad purpose. For bad purpose means it can lead to violent tendencies, evil tendencies. That's why Patanjali tells you, you should be fully established in Ahimsa before you take the first step in yoga practices. Because concentration gives us tremendous potency and power to whatever we do. So, and again, many of these practices, like it's asana, pranayama, pratyahara, these three. Asana, physical exercises, yogasana exercises, because it not only produces muscular physical energy, it also generates nervous energy, and that creates restlessness. Also pranayama even produces much more nervous energy and heat before we produce this extra energy, mind should be trained and restrained to use this energy only for a good purpose. So, for the first discipline is non-violence. Satya means truthfulness. Asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. It all in a way more or less interrelated. But ahimsa is very important because it is so physical. So, again moral disciplines like truthfulness. Again, we should be able to guard our mind from becoming too greedy. So, you have to practice asteya and aparigraha, means not taking things that belong to others. Non-stealing is the literal translation. Actually what it means, not having a desire that doesn't belong to us. And also not to go on receiving gifts, greediness, possessiveness, and pure life. Without these, one should not enter the path of yoga in a serious way. One can practice yogasana, of course, no doubt, small asanas. But you know, the Shiva, Gheranda Samhita, and then Hatha Yoga Pratipika and Shiva Samhita, 3 important books, source books of yoga, yogasanas. They will tell you that certain physical postures, I am not discussing on yoga postures, but incidentally, Siddhasana and Shishasana. Siddhasana can create hyper energy, and Shishasana can cause the blood flow intensely in the brain, and that can, before that is done, one should be established in self-restraint, otherwise multiple thought current, thought wavering, you know, and constant stream of thought, undisturbed stream of thought, disconnected thoughts can happen. So anyway, these ideas are mentioned in the commentaries. Patanjali is very brief, 195 statements, small pithy statements. Some of them may be very short, some of them slightly longer, that's all. So what it means is one should first of all be established in certain moral and spiritual disciplines. It's called yamas, 5. Ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, and aparigraha. The second list of disciplines more or less linked to our physical observances. For example, tapa, shaucha, tapa, swadhyaya, isha panidhana. Shaucha, tapa, swadhyaya, isha panidhana. Shaucha means inner purity, outer purity. Santosha means contentment. Swadhyaya means feeding the mind with good food. And again, constantly connecting our mind to higher thoughts, and then a kind of austerity, self-discipline, for example, frugal life. You know, in modern times, in modern language, say simple life and high thinking, you know, that sort of thing. Life should be very, very simple, but thought should be high. Now, the point is, thoughts are very low, life is very high. So, six-star hotel, luxurious accommodation, but activities and lifestyle very, very low. So, the opposite of it is what this Patanjali says: simple living and high thinking, so to speak. Higher ideas, but frugal life. It means contentment. So this contentment is something very important. Santosha. In Sanskrit, samyak tosha. Samyak actually it's a kind of upasarga, preposition. But it means you feel that you have got something and beyond this you don't want anything more. A man of santosha, real contentment, he will not be inactive, he will not be lazy, but he will not be shocked, he won't be depressed if he doesn't get everything that he is working for. A failure cannot have a negative impact on him. You won't feel devastated if a business collapses, if some money you lose in, or you have to resign from a position. Because what happens is you have got something else. There is something, a much more precious wealth, that is contentment. So it is not happiness. Frequently, translations do a terrible job frequently. Santosha means happiness. You get a new car, you are happy. If a car breaks down, you are unhappy. You gain money in the stock exchange, you are happy. The bank collapses, unhappy. So every experience of happiness, the mundane empirical level, is only a temporary absence of unhappiness. It is not happiness, it is only absence of unhappiness that is very temporary, because you will be happy again. So this goes on changing happiness, unhappiness equation. Now contentment is something different. Contentment is a kind of transcendental feeling of satisfaction. If satisfaction or happiness can have a transcendental dimension, it is called santosha or contentment. So the first discipline is purity, the second one is santosha. And then tapa, actually it comes naturally, because you place austerity. And then what happens, when a person is fully established in non-violence, freedom from greed, freedom from possessiveness, and also fully contented, then naturally he will be trying to look for some higher ideas, higher teachings. When he goes to the library, he may take up a book that's more, there's a lasting value, which may sustain such spiritual ideas. He may read books and ideas, he may connect himself with ideas that may have a spiritually enriching value. It is called swadhyaya. Simple words means feeding your mind with good nutritious food, as I mentioned yesterday. That is swadhyaya. Self-study is the literal translation. It can be different, it can take different forms. You may read a good book, you may listen to wonderful music, you may listen to something that is spiritually enriching, be beneficial to you. That is called swadhyaya. Ishvara pradhana is something different. Maybe it is the only context where Patanjali refers to God, but it's got a tremendous significance for a believer in God. Now, when you resign yourself to God, what happens is you feel relieved. Frequently we mention, suppose you are supposed to take a huge weight, very heavy box you have to carry on your head. If that box is sitting on your head, you feel the weight. But suppose there is a little gap, 5 millimeter gap, between the hairline and the top of, and the box. What happens is the box is not touching our head. It is somewhere very close, but still it is not touching our hairline. Then what happens is we don't feel the weight. So when you resign yourself everything to God, what happens is some higher transcendental power interferes when you have a big task to perform, when you have a big problem to solve, and also you feel that there is something much higher than anything belonging to this world, somebody much more powerful than any material entity that can come to assist you for your rescue and for your help. This conviction helps you to do great things. That's why, of course there are many examples. Even you, in Christian tradition, for example, you think of the transformation of Saint Francis of Assisi. Was a soldier, it's a knight, and then not a very spiritual thing he was doing, he was killing people in the battle. Or Saint Paul, who was not a good friend of Jesus Christ, later he became of course a saint. Or Saint Augustine, his own mother was worried about what sort of life he was living. And you find such examples. Spiritual transformations take place when a person practices Ishvara Pranidhana. In Sanskrit, there are dozens of books written on this subject. It's a great philosophy is built around this concept of resigning or self-surrender to God. Narada Bhakti Sutra, Shandilya Bhakti Sutra, Bhagavata Purana, and above all, Ramanujacharya, the great Vaishnava philosopher, has built a very wonderful philosophical system which says that when you surrender yourself to God's will, then what happens is, first of all, you don't feel you're responsible if something happens to you or something happens to somebody because of your own unselfish activity. You feel relieved. We can ask this question. It's a very important subject, but it's not really part of the topic right now. Ramanuja's Prapatti Siddhanta is his philosophy of self-surrender. These are the 5 disciplines one can follow. But the most important thing relevant to IT age is this santosha, contentment. Without contentment, we can never be really happy in life. It's a very important thing. And contentment depends upon our mind, our emotional system. How our mind reacts. So, this contentment leaves no scope for any kind of depression, anxiety, worry. Again, it is not inaction, inactivity, indifference, inefficiency, or running away from the realities of life. Rather, it is the art of facing the realities of life in a more intelligent, meaningful manner. After that only, of course, there in this context, this Patanjali mentioned something that yesterday one of our friends, one of the audience raised this question, Vitarka Badhane Pratipaksha Bhavanam. It's a very important tool Patanjali is suggesting. So if you feel depressed, you feel too anxious, it's a part of modern life, these complexities of modern life. Then what happens is, we feel because we lost money or job, how to counter the negative mental condition brought about the job insecurity. The only way is, you should remember, well, we are not going to remain in this state of joblessness for all time. Because the very fact that you lost job means that you are going to get job again. Because the condition of being employed is impermanent. So the condition of being unemployed is also impermanent. We forget that and we become anxious and worried and depressed. This is one of the major problems in human life. Sometimes we identify too much with the negative, with the failures, with the negative or undesirable part of human life. And we think that undesirable situation is going to be permanent. Because we are suffering where we identify also with that. But we should remember the Pratipaksha Bhavana is a kind of counter thought. So that you become immune to that state of anxiety and worry. So what happens is, when our mind is assaulted by perverse thoughts, negative thoughts, then we should counter it by bringing positive thoughts. Lose money, well, you should remember, rich people are not necessarily the best and the most contented, or they are not the happiest people in the world. So money is coming and going. It's a simple common sense. The problem is we are not able to make use of this simple common sense when we are confronting the problem. You may read a book on contentment. You may write a thesis on contentment, you get a PhD. When you have the slightest problem, you go crazy, you become depressed. The point is, what we know intellectually, we are not able to make use of in real life. That's the only problem. It's not that we don't know. Many people know a lot of things. Some of the, you get some of the well-known psychiatrists are patients of depression, anxiety and worry. They go to another doctor. They themselves are treating these patients. So what happens is, often what we know intellectually, we are not able to use in real life. So Patanjali says, we should be able to use in our real life what we actually know intellectually. There should not be any gap. Otherwise all learning becomes futile. So that's why he says, vitarka badhine padipaksha bhavan. And then asana, pranayama, pratyahara. I'm not going to the entire Ashtanga Yoga. We have, as I mentioned yesterday, we have extensive lecture programs. Each aspect of this is sutta being discussed in so many sessions, so you can make use of them. But I want to tell you is this one. Pranayama is fatal, lethal, deadly unless we are ready for it. It can only benefit the pharmaceutical industry producing medicines for psychiatry department, or it can benefit only psychiatrists. They can get a fat checkbook, that's all. Because pranayama, unless done under a great teacher or following all the disciplines, it is an invitation to disaster. I only mentioned the triple delusions, but I'm not going to go beyond that. That is the delusions of grandeur, delusions of persecution, and delusions of reference, so to speak. And then again, another point is a natural inclination to do something wrong. That's another point is there. So anyway, I'm coming. The samadhi is not very relevant in the present context, because today this is the last session of this class. So I shall try to fold up with some other very important things. Now, Patanjali makes a very important statement here, in that those who are interested, Samadhipada, the 14th sutra. Sadhu dirghakala nairantarya satkara asevido dudhabhumi. It's a very simple verse. Satu dirghakala nairantarya satkara asevido dudhabhumi. So these disciplines should be practiced for a long time without any interruption and with a great sense of sanctity and sacredness with devotion. This is something very important, and it needs a lot of explanations. We can understand if somebody tells you you have to practice contentment, non-violence, absence of greed for a very long time, is quite obvious, and again without any interruption. But there is one word used here, that is satkara asevido, means it should be done with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. That's an important component of spiritual disciplines. Whatever we do, we should bring in this element of sanctity and sacredness, which is technically called Shraddha. So anything we do in our life with an indifferent attitude, oh, it doesn't matter much. You know, you don't do very well. So if you ask a great scientist, you find he studied science. If you like Einstein, for example, he studied whatever he studied with great reference to the teacher from whom he studied, and also with a great reference to the subject that he studied. This is a very important thing. Even in mundane empirical world, you find a great painter. He must have respected his painter, the teacher who taught him painting or music, for example. A great musician, he approached the science of music with a great reverence, a sense of sanctity and sacredness. Otherwise, you won't feel any joy or satisfaction in studying what you study. Because what happens is, people, like you have seen people who are bitter. Absolutely, they are never happy. Somehow they want to look for some loophole, some problem. They may study making friends in business, Dale Carnegie. They may write another book like that. But in real life, our mind goes towards something that is something wanting lacking, something imperfect, at least according to them. That's because they are not able to approach anything with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. Again, I am not using this term in the religious sense. You should pray to God with sanctity, not in that sense. It technically called Saddha. Saddha is not necessarily a religious value. It is simple common sense. And you can find everywhere, even those who make missile system, anti-ballistic missiles, or intercontinental ballistic missiles, atomic scientists, those who even produce destructive weapon systems, the great scientists who have made contributions to advanced weapon technology, they do their work with a great sense of sanctity and sacredness. Only the end result may not be very good, but when they study, they are able to do well in whatever work they are doing, not necessarily good work for the humanity, but still they are able to do this successfully because they approach the subject with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. This is all the more important in great music. Great artist, a man like Bach, the German museum, and example from in Western tradition, or even in Tyagaraja. A man, there was a great musician in India. Actually, for him, music was God. Music was everything sacred in him, and he became an immortal name. He was a wandering mendicant who rejected treasures, honors, and gifts from kings and emperors, and he became immortal name. There are many, of course, but coming to Western tradition, you find the great mystics, the great musicians you find, especially those whom we remember with a sense of awe. There was something in them. It's because they approached whatever they studied, they excelled, perfected with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. Yoga also is very important. Any of these disciplines like Ahimsa, non-violence, or contentment, or Swadhyaya, all these should be practiced for a long time, continuously, that we can understand. Nairantarya means without any break, without continuously. And then some satkara means you should honor that topic. That's very important. If we don't practice this with a sense of sanctity and sacredness in our heart, we won't be benefited spiritually. This is a very, very important point. So any discipline for the matter, we should honor that discipline, approach that discipline with a sense of sanctity and sacredness. So with this, I'm going to finish this discussion because I found yesterday that during this interaction, it was very exciting and I think very beneficial. And I was surprised and very happy, pleasantly surprised that many wonderful questions came up yesterday, which led to interesting discussions that be part of the class. So now I would rather invite you to ask questions. You are most welcome. We have enough time. I think we have almost 35-40 minutes, even more you can take to the last session. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. I'm going to speak loudly because I heard that, and I recommend that when you use this handheld microphone so that it can be heard on the streaming, that you hold it up close and speak up. So I'm going to do that. Thank you, Maharaj. The discussion would be incomplete without referring to some of the warnings we've already received from authors who were versant with classics and with Vedanta spirituality, authors like Aldous Huxley of Brave New World, who was a student of Vedanta, and George Orwell of 1984. Yeah. So yes, IT can be a useful tool, or it can produce dystopian consequences that we've already received warnings about. Now, 30 or 40 years ago, the industry pioneers would use references to 1984 and to Brave New World to suggest that these tools could be used for good, for personal empowerment, for relief of repetitive labor, and for healthy individuality. That was 30 or 40 years ago. Now we see data mining and the sort of tyranny of popularity that things are pushed at people because they are commercially valuable, because their privacy has been invaded, and the industry has also taken a tack that says that what's subjective and what we do with our own mind is not as reliable as what the hive mind and what the collective has to say about what's good for you. So my question is that in the absence of editors and curators for this information, do we go back most successfully to Yoga Sutras to re-examine what's really good for us and how to be truly friends with our own mind independently of all that?
Yeah, yeah. I would, your question was heard. Should I repeat the question?
I think it was heard.
That's fine. So perhaps, I may take the liberty to inform you that Bobby Coleman himself, the son of one of the pioneers of computer industry in this country, for your information, that makes the question more intelligible. And he used to mention that his own father used to take interest in music in certain areas of self-enrichment, which is different from information technology. Because unless you are supported by something more spiritually enriching, information technology can create depression. It can create a kind of inner vacuum. And because, there's a verse in Sanskrit language, Yappuman adhimedhavi chadurnam ekamasnudi alpayu anavadyova daridra padito biva. It's a long verse which I won't inflict the long translation, but one point is, anyone who's endured with tremendous intellectual ability or emotional ability, if that person is working very hard in any area, music, art, literature, anywhere, if he doesn't have some spiritual support, his life can be a disaster. So you can see alcoholism, drug addiction among certain musicians, artists. Maybe yesterday I was referring to the Idiot and Brothers Karamazov. Dostoevsky was perpetually a drunkard, in a way. So you can imagine, I don't want to go beyond that. The point is, unless we have the support of something from humanities, something from higher spiritual literature, art, or anything, what happens is it creates a vacuum. And that can lead to problems like anxiety, depression, and so on. Because information technology can also become disinformation technology or misinformation technology, because we become slaves of information. We get information that we don't want, as this invasion of information into our own private lives. Information can do and undo things in our life. So very often, unless we are supported by something other than information technology, by itself it can only produce undesirable results. That's the point. And the verse I mentioned is very true. We can see people who have spent an entire lifetime to do great things for their life, for their job, for their security. And finally, when they have already settled, have a good job, a lot of money in the bank, and then they don't know what to do, what next. The question, what next, is a big question. And there is no answer from information technology to the question, what next? And that answer can be found only from humanities or from spirituality. Humanities do contain a lot of resources. Literature, history, philosophy, music, arts, religious studies, all of them give a certain knowledge, and also they are the source of wisdom. We don't get wisdom from IT. That's why IT can become DT, means disinformation technology. So wisdom is very important. Say there is a evolution, information, knowledge and wisdom. This is how mind evolves. Information is neutral. Information can be very good, very bad. Knowledge, of course, is the collection of disconnected information pieces into one organic whole. Wisdom is the knowledge of, how to handle information, how to use it for a positive, good purpose, and how to resist the temptation to use it for a bad purpose. That's what is called wisdom, and the wisdom we can get only from humanities. That's why a man like Bach, he was wandering like a beggar. You can see there's an interesting scene in his life when he met Frederick the Great, the Prussian king. The king honored him, but he was so unrecognizable, he was like a wandering beggar. But he didn't care for anything other than his music. So that gives you a kind of transcendental wisdom when you identify with what you study and what you excel in. That excellence, the perfection, brings in a kind of transcendental spiritual wisdom. And without that, the man who excels in music and art will go straight to the bottle to lift up the steam. That's the problem. Instead of that, he should go and read the Sermon on the Mount or the Gita or Upanishads or anything that contains higher wisdom. As I mentioned yesterday, at least Henry Thoreau's Walden. At least that can be an excuse for anything. So, okay, thank you.
Pranam, Swamiji.
Yeah.
Yesterday you were speaking about that it wasn't really necessary for someone who developed ethical virtues, who was a good person, who had many virtues. It wasn't necessary for that person to go to a church, to go to a temple, to go to a... And recently, I've read something that Swami Vivekananda said. I forget which of his writings it is, but he said, it's good to be born in a church, but it's very bad to die in a church. And one of the things I wanted to ask was, did he mean that literally, or did he mean that as the ideology or the doctrine of the church, stop church or being in the church? And another thing is...
excuse me, I shall answer this question.
Okay.
And then I will come to the next question. Otherwise, I have to write down the early question.
Sure. Go ahead.
Thank you. So now, what the question is very relevant. The idea that we don't need to practice any traditional religious discipline like going to church or a temple. It is okay only in yoga tradition and Advaita tradition. Now, yoga tradition is not necessarily spiritual in the very conventional sense. See, yoga, for example, Patanjali doesn't give much importance to God. There are just one or two references. That's true, not in a monotheistic sense. Remember, Patanjali's God is not a creator God that we associate with the popular Hinduism or any Abrahamic religion. It is some higher divine advanced soul. That's the meaning in which he used the word Ishvara. Now, what Swamiji meant was simple. The church or a temple or any place of worship or rituals represent the early phase of our spiritual evolution. We need to begin somewhere, and the temple, the church or synagogue or Buddhist place, all these are very, very important, essential and indispensable when you begin your spiritual life. But at the same time, when we become temple goers or church goers, and then we completely forget that when we come out of the church or a temple, then there is something wanting, something incomplete in that sort of spirituality. Now, at a higher level, we should be able to feel the same sanctity and sacredness that we normally associate with in a temple or church. When we come out of it, we should be able to feel the same. This may not happen at the beginning, but we have to reach that stage eventually. That's why we have a statement in our website. It's actually from Vivekananda, where Swamiji says, I'm not quoting, but something like this. If you can, Swamiji sit standing on Market Street, that in 1900s, if you can feel tranquility and peace and presence of the divine everywhere, Swamiji says, that's the highest state. This is not quotations, the essence of what Swamiji says. But that is only meant for a Vivekananda or a Shankaracharya or a Christ or a Buddha or Ramakrishna Paramahansa. No, for the common person. This is very important. So somebody, a child who is going to kindergarten or the first grade, second grade, primary school, and if he assumes that I don't have to study, I am becoming an Einstein, it doesn't really work well for him. He has to begin somewhere. So all rituals, all temples, all external ceremonies are very, very important. Without them, this tradition cannot be sustained. Very, very important. Because we are not what we believe in. We are what we evolve into, what we become. We read a book, I am Buddha, I don't become a Buddha. People sometimes they misunderstand. Oh, I am Brahman, oh, nothing else for me to do. God is everywhere, so nothing for me to do. It's not that way. That is a set of internal experience with the result of our spiritual evolution, not an idea or a concept that we believe in. So this is a very important thing. You should be able to feel the divine when you are standing in the market streets of San Francisco, but that is only for somebody who has already practiced for long years these early disciplines. Then only you reach that stage. So you don't reject the temple or a church, you only go beyond them. You don't give up, you transcend them. See, when a professor teaching in Stanford or Harvard, he doesn't have to read the early books meant for primary school students. But he doesn't say, these books are worthless, I don't need them. He doesn't need, but he cannot say nobody needs them. Even he also will need them, because he is using the same language that he studied in kindergarten. For writing his thesis, using the same language that he studied in kindergarten 50 years ago. So it's a very important thing to remember. It's not a concept. It is actually a matter of inner experience. That's why Patanjali is surprisingly very interesting. He gives a lot of importance to these simple practices. One can become a temple goer or a church goer and a very violent person. And actually we are witnessing that every day, social media, newspapers, and we are witnessing. People are very religious and they are so violent. But Patanjali says, if you want to step into spiritual life, Ahimsa. But then there are people who define spirituality in terms of Himsa, violence. So you can see the relevance of Patanjali's teaching. Anyone who has the least violent tendency cannot be spiritual, cannot be religious. So you can imagine the logic of Patanjali. He says, in fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, 16th chapter, Ahimsa satyam akrodhas tyaga shantira paishunam daya bhudeshu aloluptam madhavam hi achapalam. Gita says, first discipline, Ahimsa. 16 disciplines are mentioned. More than 16, 24, much more, in different places. First discipline, Ahimsa. Ahimsa we should practice. Actually, when you practice Ahimsa, the first of the yamas, yama is the first of the eightfold disciplines, and Ahimsa is the first of yama. If you practice Ahimsa, you can go all the way to Samadhi. Maybe not in this life, next life. So this is very, very important. That's the logic of Patanjali. So once we practice these disciplines, we go beyond the temples and churches. We don't reject them. We transcend them. What you transcend, you belong to that. What you reject, you don't belong to that. You give up. This is very important. Thank you for the question. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. So my question was also on this yama and niyama, very important steps before the asana pranayama. So this ahimsa, satya, asateya, all of these, asteya, are there also specific daily practices to do for that, or is it a concept that you should behave like that?
Yeah, that's why Patanjali mentions later satkara sevido dadabhumi. What it means is, when you study these ideas with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, you naturally start practicing them. Suppose we read about ahimsa, non-violence. It's a very important thing. With that kind of sanctity and sacredness, if you read and try to imbibe, then you find yourself, it remains in your mind, all these values slowly begin to evolve. These qualities we begin to develop in our own mental system. It doesn't involve any kind of physical exercise or anything. Because once we imbibe these values, then these values will have an impact on how we conduct ourselves, how we interact with other people. That is very scientific. The ahimsa is very natural, very simple, and also is the mother of all virtues. In Mahabharata says ahimsa paramo dharma. Very complex, very difficult. Dharma is a very complex ideal. But if one can practice ahimsa in thought, word and deed, it's wonderful. Ahimsa is not doing anything, and not doing any violent act, not having any violent thought. See, if you are a soldier, if you are a special forces officer, you have to do things which may involve, physically speaking, kind of act of himsa or violence. But that is what is saving the country and the people from greater violence. So it becomes ahimsa. That's the idea behind. That's why in the commentaries, the implications go beyond the literal translations. Thank you. Yeah.
Namaskar, Swami. This ahimsa, it's easy for us to walk out of here thinking, I'm not aggressive, I don't hit somebody, I'm not shooting a stranger, these kind of interpretation of ahimsa. Can you expand, you're getting there, can you expand a little more on that? Like, what does ahimsa mean beyond just not shooting somebody, like, can you expand there?
Yeah, ahimsa, it means not having any violent thought against anything or anyone. You see, you can do a great job for your country's protection, which may involve, if you're a soldier in the military, your responsibility, your practice of ahimsa can involve some physically violent deed when the nation, the society is facing a danger. But that is not himsa, it is also part of ahimsa. That is dharma himsa tathaiva cha. Dharma himsa means himsa for dharma is also ahimsa. That's why ahimsa, if you interpret, there can be a lot of problems in this world. I don't want to say Mahabharata is full of instances in this context. Full of instances. Most of the problems in Mahabharata happened because one man had a very wrong interpretation of ahimsa, that is Yudhishthira. He did not act when a terrible thing was going on in the Kaurava's court. That triggered the entire war. So it's a very important book, important study. So it is easy to interpret ahimsa as not doing anything. But that can be very hypocritical. I gave the example, Neville Chamberlain was trying to practice ahimsa. The result was that 80 million people, maybe more, lost their life in Second World War. So you can imagine Neville Chamberlain treaty with Hitler, I think 1938 or 39, Munich Pact, which gave confidence to Hitler to attack, which actually was the beginning of Second World War, invasion of Poland and Czechoslovakia, then Ribbentrop-Molotov treaty, and then Czechoslovakia is divided into pieces. So that's how France was attacked, invaded. Later Second World War actually began in full window. So what happens is, one man's attempt to practice what he misunderstands as ahimsa can eventually cause a chain of himsa events in this world. So do you think Neville Chamberlain was practicing ahimsa by not stopping Hitler? No. So that's why if you literally interpret, even in Gandhi's activities, there are many, many instances where Gandhi is certainly not the perfect ideal of what he should have done. I'm not going to that because it's a different, we unnecessarily should not stretch this discussion to all parts of European history or American history or Indian history, which is beyond the scope. The point is, ahimsa is a very complex subject. But really speaking, I tell you, a genuine spiritual seeker will have no doubts. Because there is something in all of us which answers all questions. If you are sincere, then a sincere spiritual practitioner will know what is appropriate. Do you think Abraham Lincoln was not practicing ahimsa by starting this civil war? Because of his war, many people got freedom and life. It's an act of ahimsa. You can stretch these examples to any extent. All over world history you can find. So that's why ahimsa is a very complex subject. But so that's why if you give a literal interpretation, there is a lot of scope for misunderstanding. Yeah.
Maharaj, my question is this, which is, by the very nature of information technology, information has become so abundant, and it is coming at us all day, every day. Information is being marketed to us. And on the one hand, it enables great access, lectures from all over the world, spiritual ideas, things that we never could have accessed easily before, we can access quite easily. On the other hand, the amount of poisonous information coming at us is voluminous. And my question is, how can we cultivate the discrimination to become aware of what we're actually consuming and to choose wisely?
Yeah, that's true. No, if we become slaves of the information that invade our own mental space, that's true. But one way to do that is to cultivate an interest in simple processes, literature, history, music, philosophy, other areas of learning, because that expand the horizon of our mind. I feel, if you don't mind, many of the unfortunate things that happen in our schools, where a lot of shootings take place, small children, because many of those children may have had desire for learning art and music and painting and so on, but they were all given this technology related education, because technology cannot feed your mind, only humanities can feed your mind. History can give a lot of food to the mind. Literature can give enormous nutritious food to the mind. Music can do, poetry can do, but not technology. Technology is neutral, it's a tool only. A tool can convert us into its tools in its hands. We become tools of technology. So on the other hand, along with our technology, our work in the computer science or whatever it is, if we can spend our time in religious studies, arts, music, poetry, literature, history, philosophy, what happens, these humanities give us a picture of the real life as such. Remember, when you read this creative literature or any of these, we come across different personalities. Like you may find your own friends if you read Dostoevsky or Tolstoy or Shakespeare. You find your own grandparents, your own uncles, your own relatives, yourself you find. Because they, great writers, they recruit their characters from society, from streets, from everywhere. So the point is, when our attention is focused exclusively on a piece of machine and we are only trained to press a button, the right button, what happens? Mind, emotions get famished, undernourished and become weak. And as I mentioned yesterday, you don't give food to your dog, dog bites you. Or if you give it bad food, thorns and stones, you feed your mind with, if dog, it bites you. So we should feed our mind with good food, nutritious food. All these are wonderful things. So taking interest, I think the simplest and most straightforward way to balance, to give a balanced diet to the mind is literature, history, philosophy, or these programs, these programs. Because they present before you another reality of human existence, another possibility of human life. And that that enriches your own understanding of what life should be all about or what life is all about. That's an important contribution. So humanities is the only solution. It's a very vast umbrella topic. Okay, thank you. I think we have, we have 5 minutes more. Thank you.
Okay. Pranam Maharaj. So regarding santosh and contentment, I was curious about, the balance one need to strive between santosh and a little bit of asantosh for growth, for, when you are identifying certain areas which need improvement, even in the spiritual field or your work or something else. So an aspect of asantosh or discontentment might be required for you to strive to grow and fill up those gaps. So I'm just curious on how do you balance between the two to avoid stagnation?
So first of all, what is the meaning of santosha in the Ashtanga Yoga? The same word can have a different meaning in literature, language. So remember, a word when used in philosophy or in a technical subject can have one meaning and definition, but its meaning in a dictionary will be just a fragment of the real implication. So santosha means a state of mind where it can never be disturbed. It can never feel any want, any dirt, any absence of anything. It is fully contented. It doesn't want anything more. It means it has gone beyond happiness-unhappiness equation. It is never unhappy because it is not seeking happiness. It is never dissatisfied because it is not seeking satisfaction. That's the real meaning of santosha in the Ashtanga Yoga. Sauja, santosha, tapasya, adhyaya, sapadana, niyamas. Now, coming to other subject, I mentioned this while dealing with the sutra in the Sadhanapada, the 15th sutra, that is Parinama, Tapa Samskara, Samskarahi, Gunavutti Virodhacha, Dukkhameva Sarvam Vivekinaha. Then the sutra says, you have to develop the Parinama Dukkha. Dukkha here more or less means what you imply by the word asantosha. Which means, actually Vyasa writes a commentary. Vyasa says, there is a higher discontentment, a noble discontentment, like Buddha had. Buddha was not feeling miserable, wretched, when he was walking from Lumbini to Bodh Gaya in search of an answer to the darker realities of life, old age, sickness or death. Buddha was looking for an answer. He was not feeling what a rich man will feel, a greedy rich man will feel when he loses money. He was feeling the urge for something higher and universal, something noble. It's called parinama. It actually has a parinama means transformation. So it had a transformative impact on Buddha's life. If he can develop a higher want, higher desire, noble desire for something, you can eliminate all lower desires. Suppose you want to become a very nice, good person, very wonderful desire. Nobody knows you, he wants to be a good person, that is very bad. The desire to be a good person is a very noble desire. Without that noble desire, you cannot make progress. This is very important. So, in that context, it becomes a transformative desire. That is called parinama dukkha. I mean, Buddha became aware of an incompleteness, imperfection in life, and that conviction had a transformative effect on him. So he looked for an answer. Eventually he became Buddha when he practiced meditation for years. Ikasane sushudha me shariram tagasti mamsam cha vilayam chayatu aprapya siddhim bhujanma durlabham naivasanat kayam adashaleshide. Buddha's biographer, in the Lalita Vistara, he narrates Buddha's determination as he sat under Bodhi tree with a strong desire to find an answer to this question, and he did find an answer to the question. So it's better, it's very good to have a noble, wonderful, a spiritual goal and a desire to achieve the spiritual goal that will help you to do away with, to remove all undesirable desires. Okay, thank you. I think our session is coming to an end, and I'm very grateful to all of you who attended. And okay, yeah. Last question. Okay.
Namaskar, Swamiji. Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about some things I've seen in my circles, which is that these powerful topics from olden times, such as karma and dharma, are used for kind of spiteful kind of concepts. They're contorted. Dharma has become about vengeance. It's brought up in context like that, and karma is brought up in negative context, such as I got something stolen from me. They will get what they deserve. So this leads me to believe that there's a certain level of self-definition or ignorance that is behind these concepts. You have spoken on volumes about how you can educate yourself, but I wanted to ask you how you can help guide others into kind of imploring them, having them explore how to think about these concepts. In a holistic.
So you want to help others, very wonderful. You ask them to watch these events, these programs. And also you inspire your friends and others to be interested in these higher discussions. Frequently you are correct actually, you are absolutely correct. In modern time, that's one of the negative results of the information technology. Because very often non-authentic and simplistic and very, very misleading interpretations are available, given by people who may not have access to the original text or studied from an original teacher. The problem is, spirituality is a wild country. If you want to learn medicine, you have to go to a medical institution, you have to get a degree, you have to learn medicine from another doctor. Then only you will be allowed to practice medicine. It's also engineering. But in spiritual science, anyone can do anything. There are many people who carry with them a portable mic system with the entire thing. When they go, they stop their car in the middle of a street or maybe in a countryside, they give a lecture on how to attain Brahman, how to become a Buddha. Now, the problem is, you won't allow that to happen. See, you get a job in Google or Intel, you need a degree. You should study the subject. However, you cannot go near that. But in spirituality, anyone can do anything. That's a problem. Today, you don't hear much about Meister Eckhart, one of the greatest names in Christian mystical tradition. Maybe the only authentic Advaitin was a German Dominican priest who lived in 13th century Germany, one of the greatest names in Christian mystical tradition. You don't hear about Meister Eckhart. You may hear some other Eckharts. I don't want to mention, but the point is, this happens, it's a fact. And one of the ways to understand, connect to the genuine. If you want to learn about, you may not believe in what Jesus Christ taught, but you should learn Jesus' teachings from somebody who studied properly. Then you can disagree. That's so absolutely, we need not blindly believe in anything. But you see, that's what we do in physics. You may reject Einstein. You have to study physics from a university under a teacher who has studied physics. Who must have studied physics? Another teacher. You cannot sit in your room without going to any university and Einstein was wrong. You can't say that. You have full freedom to have a different view, but you study first. In spirituality, the problem is you don't have to study because you have this mic in front of you and the world is your audience. That's creating a chaotic anarchism, a kind of an anarchy. So you tell your friends to listen to some good, authentic programs, okay? And you try to attend these events, okay? Thank you. Very relevant question, the last question.
Swamiji, there's one real quick question online. They're asking which Yoga Sutra relates to mindfulness?
Oh, yeah. Now, Yoga Sutras themselves do not directly mention what is now known as mindfulness. But Yoga Sutra, you see, for example, you see, Yoga Chittavarti Nirodhaka exercise is there. And then Yoga Sutra tell you when you can be aware of your own mental emotions and feelings, then what happens is your emotions and feelings become your Vrittisarupam Itaratra. One point is the Vrittisarupam Itaratra means if you are not fully able to witness your own emotions, your mind will assume the form of whatever vrittis are coming to your mind. Remember, so yoga chitta vritti nirodhaka. When you are able to practice nirodha of your vrittis, when the vrittis are waves, then they cease to exist. Then you reach nirodha vritti. Vrittis are gone. At that time, you are able to witness your own vrittis. Yesterday I mentioned, you are becoming angry, you are able to watch your own anger. When you watch your own anger, there is a gap between you and your anger. When you become aware of your own anger comes down. When you become aware of the fact that you are becoming anxious, anxiety becomes the object, you become the subject, you become the witness. Otherwise, Vrittisarupam Itaratra means if you don't do that, what happens is our mind, we become identified with the object. You know, I tell you this little explanation last time when you complete it. I shall finish now. Vritti, what is vritti? Vritti represents the samskaras, the tendencies, the impressions created by our actions, not physical actions alone, thoughts, ideas, words, physical activities. They all can have a residual effect on our mind. It is called vritti. When these vrittis become consolidated, it's called samskaras. So what happens is, when you see an elephant, your mind takes the form of an elephant. That's why you see the elephant, because your mind becomes identified with the rupa of the elephant. Vritti sarupyam means your mind becomes identified with the rupa, the form of an elephant. That's why you are able to remember the elephant. The moment you remember the elephant, your mind presents before you the form of an elephant. Like that, whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we connect with, whatever we smell, all the five senses of perception dragging the mind to various objects, and every time our mind takes the form of whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we touch, whatever we smell, whatever we experience. When our mind is being dragged by all the five senses. Now when you practice nirodha vrittis, what happens, these vrittis, this multiplicity of vrittis will cease to exist. Being nirodha means cessation of vrittis. At that time, you are able to witness your own vrittis. Your mind develops anxiety, the emotion, you are able to, I am becoming unnecessarily anxious, worried. The moment you become aware of that, your anxiety goes down. Because you are not identifying yourself with your anger. When you are identifying yourself with anger, you cannot be aware of your anger, because you are identified with it. Subject is identified with object. When you become a witness, there is a division. I am watching my own mind. I am watching my own emotions. I am watching my own anger. So anger is no more there, or it comes down. Yesterday, one of our devotees, a good student of Vedanta and Yoga, Richard Schimpf, he asked this question: how to prolong this gap between our experience and our response to our experience? When we are able to witness our own experience, our own anger, our own feelings, then what happens is we can prolong it. When you prolong it, it doesn't get identified. That is the real purpose of mindfulness. Mindfulness, Sati Upattana Sutta or Mahasati Upattana Sutta. The Buddha gave two discourses, one for the laity, the other for monks. The one which he gave to the monks is shorter. The one which he gave to the householders and monks together is called longer, Mahasati. It is slightly longer. So, Sati means Smriti. Smriti means memory, awareness. Upattana means Upasthana. In Sanskrit, Upasthana becomes Upattana in Pali. It's Sutra. It's a Sanskrit. So the point is, when you become aware of something and you are able to witness it, you are able to detach yourself from it, and you become established in this awareness with detachment. That is called mindfulness. So mindfulness, the copyright belongs to Buddha. Please keep that. Thank you for the question. He himself was an embodiment of this mindfulness. Okay? Look at this picture. He's aware of everything but not attached to anything. Okay, thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.